Hello, everybody. How are you today? Welcome to another Bible story reading. It is a cold and snowy day. It's actually Super Bowl Sunday today. And I'm going to take some time in the middle of my day and do another Bible story reading. For those of you who are joining one of these videos for the very first time, I would like to tell you what we do here. We go through the different stories of the Bible. This is for people who have never read the stories, don't know all of them in their entirety. Maybe you've heard bits and pieces of them. Maybe you think you know the Bible stories, or maybe you do know them, but it's been a long time since you've heard them. Whatever the case is, we go through the stories in their entirety so that you have the opportunity to know what they say. And that way, if one of the stories comes up in conversation, or you see a little meme or part of a scripture, you'll know where it comes from. You'll be able to participate in what's going on in those conversations and memes and sayings and things like that. We've been going through the story of David. David has become king over all of Israel. We left off on chapter 4 of 2 Samuel. I'm not going to read chapter 5 today. I'm going to let you do that on your own, mostly because it's just another battle, and God allows David to go into battle against the Philistines again and defeats them again. And it's sort of a short chapter. I'm going to just skip over that one and let you read that one on your own. If you have any questions about it, you can certainly message me and we can go through that together. We are going to pick up with chapter 6 in 2 Samuel. Now, if you remember, David has defeated all of Israel, all of these different battles in Israel. Saul has died. Most of his sons have died. And now David has been fully anointed king over all of Israel. So let's go ahead and start reading. David again assembled all the fit young men in Israel, 30,000. He and all his troops set out to bring the ark of God from Baal Judah. The ark bears the name of the Lord of armies, who is enthroned between the cherubim. They set the ark of God on a new cart and transported it from Abinadab's house, which was on the hill. Uzzah and Ahio, sons of Abinadab, were guiding the cart that brought the ark with it, the ark of God from Abinadab's house on the hill. Ahio walked in front of the ark. David and the whole house of Israel were dancing before the Lord with all kinds of firwood instruments, lyres, harps, tambourines, sistrums, and cymbals. When they came to Nachon's threshing floor, Uzzah reached to the ark of God and took hold of it because the oxen had stumbled. But the Lord's anger burned against Uzzah, and God struck him dead on the spot for his irreverence, and he died there next to the ark of God. David was angry because of the Lord's outburst against Uzzah, so he named that place Outburst Against Uzzah, as it is today. David feared the Lord that day and said, "How can the ark of the Lord ever come to me?" So he was not willing to bring the ark of the Lord to the city of David. Instead, he delivered it to the house of Obed-Edom of Gath. The ark of the Lord remained in his house 3 months, and the Lord blessed Obed-Edom and his whole family. It was reported to King David, "The Lord has blessed Obed-Edom's family and all that belongs to him because of the ark of God." So David went and had the ark of God brought up from Obed-Edom's house to the city of David with rejoicing. When those carrying the ark of the Lord advanced 6 steps, he sacrificed an ox and fattened calf. David was dancing with all his might before the Lord, wearing the linen ephod. He and the whole house of Israel were bringing up the ark of the Lord with shouts and the sound of the ram's horn. As the ark of the Lord was entering the city of David, Saul's daughter, Michal, looked down from the window. and I looked down from the window and saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, and she despised him in her heart. They brought the ark of the Lord and set it in its place inside the tent David had pitched for it. Then David offered burnt offerings and fellowship offerings in the Lord's presence. When David had finished offering the burnt offering and the fellowship offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord of armies. Then he distributed a loaf of bread, a date cake, and a raisin cake to each one of the entire Israelite community, both men and women. Then all the people went home. When David returned home to bless his household, Saul's daughter Michal came out to meet him. "How the king of Israel honored himself today," she said. "He exposed himself today in the sight of the slave girls of his subjects, like a vulgar person would expose himself." David replied to Michal, "It was before the Lord who chose me over your father and his whole family to appoint me ruler over the Lord's people Israel. I will dance before the Lord, and I will dishonor myself and humble myself even more. However, by the slave girls you speak about, I will be honored." And Saul's daughter Michal had no children to the day of her death. The end. That is how 2 Samuel chapter 6 ends. So what did we just read? Remember, there are 3 ways that we look at these stories when we read them. What does it say? We have to have reading comprehension. We don't know what it says if we don't read the words on the page. What was it saying to the people of the time? What was going on in the history and the culture of things? And what, if anything, is it saying to us today? So we read here, let's go ahead and unpack this. We read here that David decides to bring the Ark of God, the Ark of the Covenant that bears the Lord's name, into the city of David, where David was ruling. Now, at that time, the Ark was in Abinadab's house. If you remember way back when the Philistines had captured the Ark of the Covenant, they didn't know what to do with it. They tried to get rid of it, and through a series of events, it ended up in Abinadab's house. Abinadab was a priest, and it ended up there, and that's where it had been staying. But David wanted to bring it into the kingdom and to give it a place of honor. So he summons for it, and they're rejoicing, they're bringing it, and Abinadab's 2 sons are walking with the Ark, one in front and one in back, that was on some oxen. Okay, so it's on a cart that the oxen are pulling, and the oxen stumbles, one of the ox stumbles, and Uzzah reaches out to, it's sort of instinct when I'll relate it to you this way. When I've been driving and I have to come to a sudden stop, whenever I've had somebody in the front seat, I do this real quick. I put my arm out to try to stop them from going through the windshield. When you are opening a cupboard and something starts to fall out of the cupboard, what do? But you automatically reach for it to try to catch it. Well, that's what Uzzah had done here. He saw that the thing was stumbling and he reached out to touch it. What you need to understand is that people were forbidden to touch they were not allowed to touch the Ark of the Lord, the Ark of the Covenant. I don't think that Uzzah did that with the intent of, I think I'm going to sneak over there and touch it. It was just instinct. He just instinctively reached out for it. Well, it upset God, and God struck him dead on the spot right there. Well, that caused David some great distress, and he called the name of the place that Uzzah was struck down. He called it the place, the outburst against Uzzah. What a weird thing to name a place, but that's what he named it, the outburst against Uzzah. And he said, look, I can't have this ark come to me then. I mean, if a person's going to instinctively reach out to try to save the ark and get struck down, who am I that I should have the ark come into my presence in my city? Just leave it, just take it over to these other people's house. And so they took it over to this guy's house, Obed-Edom, that was in Gath. And word gets back to David that during the 3 months that this ark was in Obed-Edom's presence in his house, him and his entire family were blessed. God blessed them. And so David's like, oh, okay, so having the ark is a good thing. I guess we'll go get it. And so they went and got it, and they start bringing it, and everybody's excited. Now you have to remember, the Ark of the Covenant was where God's presence was. It contained the words of God. It contained God and the name of God. And so it was an important thing for them to have. And David longed to have God with him at all times. That ark had been captured by the Philistines at one point. It was kind of forgotten in Abinadab's house, and now here it is coming into David's very own city, and he had even prepared a tent for it. And the people are excited, and David is excited. Imagine, if you will, if you knew that Jesus was going to be walking down your street, he's going to come down your street. Do you think you would just sit on your couch and say, oh, that's nice, Jesus is coming down my street? Or would you run outside to get a glimpse of Jesus? Well, that's what these people were doing. They were excited. David was excited. Here comes God. And so he's out there, and in his exuberance, he's dancing and he's getting excited, and he's just rejoicing. And he's doing that not just with his whole heart, but with his whole body. And he gets home. He's given all of the people these cakes, these raisin cakes, everybody, men and women. This is a celebration. This is a thing to rejoice about. God's in town. And everybody goes home. The celebration has come to an end. The ark has been placed in the tent. David goes home. Meanwhile, his wife, Michal, who was Saul's daughter. Now remember a couple chapters ago, David had made an agreement that said, oh, I'd like to get my wife back. I had gotten Michal as a wife from Saul, and he took her away from me, and she married this other dude, and I want her back. She's my wife. Well, when he got her back, her then husband, who'd she been with for a few years at that point, excuse me, I'm losing my voice again, was following after her, crying and weeping. He wanted her back too. No doubt she had some resentment going on in her heart, that here she was stuck with David. Her dad's dead. Her brothers are dead. They're all dead. The throne has now become David's. She's been stripped away from her previous husband and given back to David. And now she's standing at the window and she's watching. She's watching instead of rejoicing because the Ark of the Covenant has been brought into their city, instead of being excited that God's presence is there, instead, she looks down at David, she sees him dancing and thinks, he's made a mockery of himself. He's being inappropriate. So when he gets home, she says to him, look, you made a fool of yourself in front of all the slave girls and everything. You acted like one of those lewd people who just goes around exposing themselves. David says to her, he says, I was dancing before the Lord, who has honored me. And I was honoring him with my worship and my dancing. He says, those slave girls, the ones you're talking bad about, they'll honor me. In other words, you haven't, but they will. And then the next verse there says, and Saul's daughter Michal had no child to the day of her death. Well, I would assume that God did not allow her to have any children because he had said that Saul's household, the kingdom of Saul, would end with Saul. That nobody would be able to become king from Saul's lineage. And had Michal had any children with David, they more than likely would have had the opportunity to become heir to that throne. But because she was so bitter in her heart and so upset with David rejoicing over the Lord made it to where she had no children. So that's what we read in chapter 6. And there are a lot of things that we can look at here. It does seem to us a little disheartening maybe when we look at the fact that Uzzah reached out to touch the ark, even though he had no bad intentions, his intention was just instinctual. I'm going to stop the ark from falling off this cart. God still struck him dead. I always go back to this. One of the things that we know about God is when he says something, he means it. When he says this is going to happen, if you do this, this will happen. If you do that, that will happen. God is not a God that can lie. And certainly he understands man's heart. Remember, I told you the things of the Old Testament often point to the things of the New Testament. And David's kingship being brought up the way that it is, his dancing before the Lord, his honoring God. We know that Jesus is of the lineage of David, and Jesus becomes our ultimate king, and he is the king of the kingdom of heaven, and he will one day come. And I think that on that day when Jesus comes, unfortunately, there will be people like Michal who are watching, and they see that Jesus is coming or that Jesus has come, and they're like, I don't want anything to do with that. I'm not going to rejoice over this. Who do those people think they are, running around acting all excited because the King of Kings has come for them? But then there are people who, like David, are just excited and longing for the day that the King of Kings, Jesus, comes, and they can rejoice and dance in the presence of King Jesus. So there's stuff that we can take away from 2 Samuel chapter 6. I encourage you to go back and read 2 Samuel 5 on your own. And the next time that we get together, we will continue with the story of David. I hope you've learned something today. I hope you have a wonderful Sunday. God bless you.